Hi, dreamers. Thank you for learning with us today on Dream Speak. I'm Rika,
And I'm Thomas.
and this is the podcast about dreams that teaches you a complete system to help you listen to your dreams and get the guidance they're providing you every day.
Our guest today is Paul Kriescher, a sustainability expert who's going to share a dream with us about his personal idol, David Bowie. Welcome, Paul Kriescher. We're so honored to have you today. We really appreciate you being on with us.
Looking forward to it very much, Thomas and Rick both.
And so I'd love for you to just start by talking a little bit about your work with the project that you call Heart of a Building. And we can even get into your background a little bit too, and how you wound up doing this work.
Cool. Well, thank you. Yeah. So Heart of a Building is the inspiration that's come in the last few years to have video documentaries showcase inspiring people really, and their inspired projects here in Colorado. And we hope that we get to do some projects outside of Colorado in the not too distant future. But what we're showcasing is highly sustainable towards regenerative buildings. And why that's important to me goes back decades and decades. But I'll start with this. For me, there's a deep connection with caring for nature and how we live our days day to day. The homes and buildings we live in, the vehicles we drive around in, the food that we're eating, all of that's connected. And it's always, to me, felt like, well, what's the best way to show love towards God other than being as mindful and as knowledgeable and as good as you can be about being in harmony with nature as you're living. And I've always believed we can live in modern ways. We can find the ways to evolve how we're living still in a conditioned, comfortable home and have a comfortable vehicle to be moved around in and have food that is tasty and wonderful and not that we have to get off the land ourselves and prepare for ourselves. I believe that. I just believe that we've been in a transition of that as we learn so much about how to industrialize both the homes we built and the buildings we built and the food that we're growing, as well as how we transported ourselves. We got the technology a bit ahead of where our minds and culture could be and be caught up to. And we added this wrinkle of having politics be something where people could fund and keep their business interests going and prevent change from happening as rapidly has been really one of the sticking points and one of the problems. So long ago, I had gotten myself involved in policy and politics for that very reason of seeing that things were being done unjustly, oftentimes for a short-term financial reason and not a longer-term perspective of what would be good for the people buying the product or living in the product or eating the food product. So back in my college days is when I think I had a lot of my epiphanies about this, but I learned a lot from even younger days with my parents. My dad grew up on a dairy farm and there was connections to nature there that I was at first resistant to and then learned to really appreciate what was going on there, but also had beautiful conversations with my uncle and how he was trying to make money as a dairy farmer at that time. It was always a challenge. Talk about working all the time. There's people that would work all the time to just make ends meet. But we did have great conversations about how he could have captured the methane from the manure from his cows and used as an energy source. And as I was learning things, I'd come back to him and share ideas on that. And we'd have some cool conversations about those ideas. But those transferred into me working in policy work for a period of time with two different environmental organizations and going around and doing door-to-door canvassing to share my passion about the environment and get people to give money to help pay for lobbying work that would be done. And I learned a lot about speaking to my truth by having that done, because when people slam the door in your face, you're like, oh, okay, you better believe in what you're doing. Otherwise, you got to quit really fast. But I did that over the course of a year and a half while going to school. But then I became a lobbyist for them and got to speak to those things for the state of Wisconsin, in the state of Wisconsin, elected officials, speak to them about it. But at that time, felt like there was a lot of things we were just doing to try and prevent more bad things from happening than lots of good things from happening during that. So it steered me towards saying, well, I better learn more technical things because the policy world is wonky enough and challenging enough. Let's see if we can learn things on the technical level that really help make change happen at a certain level. And I decided on buildings because to me, it's a place where, as an American anyway, the vast, vast majority of us get to experience being in buildings. And we spend, honestly, too much time in buildings, considering how many of them have been built with not our health in mind, but more of what was the affordable way to build it at the time. But I learned that that was a space where so many people are having experiences in buildings. So if I could reach out to them and have them connect to hopefully a bit of their higher self and saying, oh, I care about what's happening in this creation, in this evolution, in this natural world, whatever you want to call it. I care about it because I'm a part of it. What can I do to show care for it? Oh, I could start in my own home or my own building and learn what it would be to make it be in harmony with nature. So I've spent now almost 30 years doing that work and working in homes and buildings, everything from doing energy audits in homes and buildings to energy modeling and consulting with people to help guide them. But what had always inspired me were the people that were willing to push the envelope and do more by far than what anyone was requiring them to do, or even what I felt my education or other people's education for them was succeeding in. They were like, I deeply feel the need to make a building that's so much better. And I love the reasons. It wasn't always like they're a tree hugger and just want to make the environment safer. There's all kinds of reasons to build a better mousetrap and prove you could do it against the economic tide, saying it would be too expensive to do it, or to do it out of a love for the students at the end of the building. Story that we had to showcase Sierra Grande School in Southern Colorado. The community said we care enough about our kids to give them the best of things, and they found that the economics worked to do it so very well. So Heart of a Building has been an opportunity to find inspiring people, because there's so many more of them now these days, and what they're doing with their homes or buildings, and then to showcase them. And had the fortune of having a relationship start with Rocky Mount PBS, for that has been our means of getting them out there to be shared. I believe fully in the wonders of YouTube and wonderful means of social media to have information shared, but it's been an easier format for me to be able to work with Rocky Mount PBS because I just respect their ethics and what they show. They require that you cannot showcase and publicize and promote like a product. You can't showcase and publicize that is the solution to all your problems, because there's no such thing in a building. A building is a complex web of things that come together, less complicated than the human body, but it's complicated. It's how ceiling works with insulation and certain windows and mechanical systems and the ventilation and daylighting coming in or direct heat coming into the building. It's complicated. And so to say we've got the solution through this product is just a bunch of crap. And so I've enjoyed PBS saying, you can't promote that. And I said, I don't want to promote it. So I like you guys. I want to be able to tell people that you have to get into it, and you have to have people that are trained and care about helping you be a building doctor or a house doctor to really figure out how to solve your problems. And don't just say, well, I saw a window company ad and I'm going to buy new windows. Like, you spent a lot of money. It's not going to solve your problems. So it's been that journey, and Heart of a Building has been a beautiful way for us to express it, and mostly to showcase what I think are inspiring other people and what they're doing. So there you go.
So each episode features one build?
Thus far, we've been doing the one build per episode with a 30-minute long episode, but we're actually looking at revising the format where we may have themed episodes now that might have to do with indoor air quality, let's say, and then have pieces of different segments of stories showcasing what can be done to improve indoor air quality in buildings and why, or renewable energy in buildings and how that works. So things like that, or different types of mechanical systems. There's a lot more push, thankfully, on electrifying buildings, but at the same time, we have to continue to get more renewable energy or more non-fossil fuel-based energy on the grid. Otherwise, it's really not helping solve the problem. But those two things are working in tandem. So we may have some storylines where we're showcasing, as you electrify, how does that help your utility bill, your environmental footprint, and greater society that way.
Well, as a school teacher, watching the episode with Rika about the Sierra Grande School was really inspiring.
It was. I love that.
It's not a particularly affluent school district. It's a rural school district. And they know that the numbers add up, which is really cool, but it also just makes for such a sustainable impact. And so it was a lot of great learning for me watching an episode. It kind of brought me up to date as a layperson about how much innovation has been made in so many things, just even daylighting, for example. But you can make a building that is just so much more efficient than our older school buildings were.
So, thank you. Yes. Yeah, that's the poorest school district in the state that had a hard time getting the bond passed. They passed about something close to 38 votes was the difference in passing that bond the second time they ran it to do that. And what they did, they were very wise. I wasn't one of the consultants on that project. I know the people that were consultants on that project, and I just think they do outstanding work. And they were wise enough as a school board to say, we know what we don't know. Let us go find the people that are the building doctors and the people that will help guide us. And then those people were very ethical and very honest about doing accurate energy models and sharing the information and really trying to guide them. And they had collective interest. The general contractor with the engineer, with the architect, they were all like, we want to solve their problem. We want to give them the best building. So
what's the website, Paul?
Our website is heartofabuilding.com. And then from that site, you'll actually, on the homepage, be able to scroll down to the middle and click on any episode you want that links you to the Rocky Mountain PBS site. So you can check them out there.
Great. Wonderful. Yeah, that's really cool. And I think it's also worth noting, too, as we transition to talking about the dream that you brought today, that's kind of how we feel about dream interpretation. It feels like it's a skill that is teachable. It's a skill that's learnable, but it's pretty nuanced. And so people have to stick with it for a while. You can't just hand somebody a magical key to unlocking their dreams, because that doesn't exactly exist. But what amazes me is if people will come along for the ride, there actually is repeatable and comprehensible meaning to the symbolic dreams that we have. It's just a matter of understanding that you have to include yourself, your unique perspective, and your life experience in it to really get all the way there.
Beautifully said.
Well, we're eager to hear about the dream you brought, so why don't you go ahead and tell us about it?
Well, my fun dreams. I'm glad we get to talk about this. My dream was focused on David Bowie. I knew in the dream he was deceased. He knew he was deceased, but we were hanging out with at least a dozen other people, including Michelina, but it was mostly David and I interacting and singing his songs together. We walked through a misty green and brown landscape. The coolest part was that all I could see at one point was his white and blue painted face, his blue hair that looked totally like Wolverine from Marvel Comics, and his body was missing. I told him that was exactly the way I drew him for a video I'd created for one of his songs. Also, I noticed a pink rash on his inner right arm.
I think what might be a fun way to start is just kind of breaking apart some of the things that we think are symbolic and the aspects or the people that are in the dream. So as far as people, it's pretty straightforward, right? It's pretty much just you and David. And then you said there was kind of a amorphous crowd of a few people that were following around.
Right. And I felt, again, like I recognized those people in the dream, but not like when I woke, like, oh, that was my friend Thomas. I was like, no, it was just people I had that sense of familiarity with. With Michelina, I recognized, I'm not positive she was in her body or is just her energy I recognized, but I was recognizing her in the dream. So there's other people energy, but mostly he and I.
I have an interesting thing I'd like to bring up to kick things off. You remember how we were discussing that I have this feeling from your floodgates opening and so many dreams coming through so easily that you might be getting yourself ready to have an experience of more dharmic significance, not just interpreting daily dreams here and there the way that some people do, but that there might be dreams as a means to an end for you spiritually.
You have mentioned that. Thank you for saying it again. And that gets really intriguing and exciting to be like, cool.
So the reason I'm bringing this up is because a little theory that I have kicking around that's very individual to you is you had voiced to me that you feel a real strong wondering and some emotional energy around this idea of having people in your dreams that don't look like them, but you know their energy. Like you've had that several times with Michelina, but that's not the only time.
Right.
And I don't know how it's going to enter into the whole symbolic picture of this dream yet, but I noticed you had that same feeling of recognition with this crowd of people that you can't really pick one out from the other. Right. So that seems to be something that plays out for you in a lot of dreams, that sense of recognition, like you know these people. Yeah. And we may have spoken about this before, but I have this theory that it's got a lot to do with your open-heartedness, which I really think is a dharmic thing for you. I think that's like a gift, something that makes Paul is this wonderful open-hearted quality and ability to look at the world through a bigger lens because you're willing to just embrace people and be more accepting of people for who they are.
Rings true.
There's this spark, this unspoilable, eternal thing that we all share, right? That all human beings and maybe other beings, I don't know a lot about those other things, but as far as human beings are concerned, I'm convinced there is something essential that makes us all the children of God, is how I often describe it.
We're all spirits, all connected to the greater consciousness, right? All elements of spirit. Yep. So keep going.
Okay, perfect. So given that feels kind of juicy to you, what I'm getting here is that you use that quality not only in your waking life, but it's like a really important spiritual quality to get and accept that we're all one or everyone has worth, just to be able to do that easily, to see past a lot of the boundaries and barriers and conflicts that might be kind of petty that keep a lot of people separated from one another. Seems like you have a gift to not be as blocked by those kinds of things. And so that general experience you have when you're having symbolic dreams of a lot of sense of recognition and exchanging one person's visage for another, I think might tie to that. And I have this weird feeling, it's just an intuition right now, but I have a feeling that dharmic theme may be tied to the theme of this particular dream.
That resonates for me, Thomas, as you're saying it. It's only been the last 3 months now that I've been giving much energy to remembering my dreams. And mostly, it seems like now the past few weeks, I'm almost always remembering the dream closest to when I'm waking up. And it almost seems like my mind is happily waking me up sometime between 3:30 and 4 and putting me back to sleep. So then I retain that last dream, or it feels like that's the last dream. There might be more, but more easily, which is interesting. It's not like, oh, I'm waking up and then having to be up for a long time. It's waking up to roll over, glance at the clock, and I'm back to sleep very quickly. But I have a mindfulness of like, oh, I want to remember this. It comes to mind as I'm there. But otherwise, I feel like for a long time in my life, I've had that sense when I've remembered dreams of like, oh, it's Michelina's energy, but she's black-haired and looks like someone I've never seen before. But I see her energy type of thing. And I've had that before I knew Michelina. And I had that with other people as my memory holds it. So, yeah, so I love that.
What's cool is that we're going to be able to support or refute that with symbolic interpretation as we go.
Okay.
We've identified the people in this dream. Did you note a few of the symbols? What were things that you thought were prominent in this dream? And remember, symbols can be really little things. Every detail carries some degree of meaning in a symbolic dream.
Right. Well, what stands out for me, there was something in that dream felt very important, that David Bowie's face reminded me so much of the Cheshire Cat. And we had watched or rewatched again one of the Johnny Depp-based Alice in Wonderland movies not too long before that, I don't think. But I remember thinking the way his head was like, oh, that's so cool. It's so like Cheshire Cat. And it's so cool he can do that from the afterlife, or whatever. Because he was dead. I knew he was dead. I was like, okay. So he's just having fun doing what he's doing. And so he expressed himself that way. But so that was an important one. When I said I drew him that way, I didn't have a pen or a paper, or I actually saw the drawing that I made of him. But when he did that, that was my memory. And as I said to you before, if I in this human body would try and draw him, he'd look like a fourth grader's effort at a stick figure. It would not be complimentary by any means. So it was like, okay, that's not it. Let's see. I remember us, like they said, we were on something that was like a gradual hill, felt very green, very damp. We were outside. It was very semi-foggy and damp. So things that would feel like Midwest fall or England weather in the spring and fall or something like that. It was very interesting how the other people just kind of stayed and were talking up on that hillside. And then he and I, like I said, his body disappeared as we were coming down that hillside. And then he was like Cheshire catting me as we were talking. Well, we were singing first, and then we started talking. But I'm trying to think of other symbols. I mean, I was just admittedly very excited to be connecting to him because I've seen him as somebody that did some incredibly beautiful growth and expression of who he was, and someone I admire in what he did in his performance art, and then became rather famous. I mean, did in the westernized world became successful. But I think he was doing it for reasons beyond that, for the most part, and just was able to express himself beautifully. So there's symbolism, like why I idolize him is that he did that. He found a pathway to be like, I'm expressing myself fully, and I'm going to make people's brains twist a little bit and see the world a little differently. And that, to me, was beautifully important. Until, yeah, of course, he'd come visit as a blue and white face that looks like Wolverine hair.
I think you just solved your dream, really. I think what you said about who he is and why you idolize him, this is this really important part of you that is coming forth, that's growing, and you are able to express yourself fully in a beautiful way. Your soul chose him in your dream because that is who you are.
So if you see me with really long hair that's blue with white and blue stripes, you'll know what happened. Oh, it's not Halloween? I just like to dress like this now. I think there's truth to that. There's a part of me that's always wanted to be on stage at some level, and I've never gone down that path. It's like athletics. And I've been what I've allowed myself to go down the path of. But anyway, there's something to that. I've told Michelina I want a bit part, one little speaking part in some major play where I could be like, even as an old dude, be like, I did it. I was on stage performing. That's one way to express it. The other ways is I will be ever more bold in getting people to connect to their hearts, connect their hearts, minds, and their actions to caring about nature and doing it in every way they can, in their homes, and how they drive, and how they eat, and what they do, without being sermony, somehow being really cool like David Bowie was. You just want to follow it because it's so cool, not because it's like preachy, like a dad. I think I've been way too much the educator, preacher about it, and maybe there has to be more of like just being damn cool somehow. But I am an educator preacher, so it takes some work.
Paul, believe it or not, there's more here. Okay. The centerpiece of this dream without doubt, is what we were just talking about. Okay, so we're no longer confused about that. It's more like now we've got the nucleus of this. We want to make sure that we understand what's orbiting around this, the other symbols. Other things I would have mentioned would be the colors. So blue and white both have symbolic meaning. Hair has symbolic meaning. Your associations with Wolverine can be explored. The rash, arms, body parts have meaning. The hill has meaning. Everything has meaning. So we'll just see how far we want to take it. You're going to kind of be in the driver's seat as far as your own comfort level. I can feel that this is a very joyous dream, and that this superconscious aspect represented by David Bowie in this dream is generally going to be connected to things that are not really in the shadow. They're kind of more about your ideal of life. So may not get that shadowy, but I can feel that there's deep, potentially emotional terrain connected to the David Bowie symbolism that would really flesh out the whole meaning of why you're having this dream at this time. And we haven't quite gotten there yet. So we got the gist when you were sharing what you shared last, but there's more even just with the David Bowie symbol. We can go deeper there. So let's just see what direction we want to go in. What do you think we should talk about next?
Well, I'm curious about the colors, the white and the blue.
Okay.
Even his hair, it was lighter, but it was a very dark blue.
You have any associations with those colors? Or those school colors? Or like, is there something that you can think of?
Well, I wear a lot of blue. I love the color blue. As color charts have been done, I was like, oh, okay, I see why I like blue. Yeah, that's something that has been a draw for me. Dark blue and white, they both feel very cool and like temperature cool. So like wintry, I think, it speaks to being somewhat open and understanding. It's not fiery red, like I'm going to go knock down the world type of thing. It's a little bit more like I'm flowing with things.
That's big right there. That concept of I'm flowing with things, because that is a dharmic statement coming from you as well, isn't it? I can feel some energy behind that.
Right. Yep. It is. It's probably something I've worked at a bit in my early 20s years, but I think it's always been a part of me, to be that way. Buddhism certainly had influence on me. What I took away from Buddhism had a lot to do with being more flowy, that along with connection to Jesus and the doing unto others and to love thy neighbor as thyself. Doing a lot of love openness felt very flowy to me. Whenever I've tried to squeeze things down, it just gets harder and harder. I was just like, I don't want life to be harder and harder. There's got to be better ways to live life. So, yeah, being more flowing with things while still being relatively grounded. Because I know there's people in beautiful ways that are very flowy, but they're not on the ground and they're hard to be around. So I just have never had the call to be that flowy. I guess it's like some balance of that. Yeah. So blue and white feel very like wintry, cool, relaxed colors.
Well, I don't know if this is going to feel relevant to you, but when we see colors in a dream, we often look at the relevance as regards the chakras. And blue is a third eye color. Lighter blue is the throat chakra, but darker blue is the third eye color. And I don't know how that feels, if that feels relevant or not. And white generally symbolizes spiritual purity.
So these are universal meanings for colors.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And one of the things that I think we've shared with you previously, but it's really important to bear in mind when you're interpreting, is that the way that this language works is every symbol has universal and personal significance, and they're always joined. So we had a nice discussion of your personal significance for blue, but there is a universal significance for that vibration as well. How did that concept of tying it to the third eye resonate with you?
I'm trying to decide if it's my ego that likes it or if it's just something else, but some part of me likes it. It feels like there could be some ego in liking it because it's like, oh yeah, I've worked at my brain and tried to use my brain, and that's what I think of with the third eye is coming through the mind. So you could help me see it differently if it's more than just seeing through the mind instead of seeing through your heart or seeing through your sacral area or things like that. So,
well, that's part of it. So what you're saying is part of it, in my opinion. I mean, I'm no expert, but the way I understand the third eye is as you move up your human chakra system, they become more and more transcendent. And so essentially the heart is incredibly powerful and it has special functions. So keep all those things that you were invoking just then, they're there, but they basically roll up into a fully truthful satyagraha style of living, is that nothing ever passes this throat that's not completely true, right? That's why yogis often live in avowed silence, because they're not willing to speak in a world that's so transcendently beautiful and creation that is so incredibly rich, multifaceted, and complex, because anything they say is not a reflection of what's true, right? And when you get here, you absolutely have the functions of the human mind, which I think is a God-given talent and responsibility that helps us distinguish ourselves from other animals on this planet. But it's certainly not just ego-based thinking. It's also the regulator of essentially more of like a soul space is the way I think of it. Kind of a bringing together of all the best parts of who we are, including our shadow, but understanding and transcending by the time you get to the sixth chakra, most of the trappings of the shadow. And that's why it's usually thought as the ruler of the intuition. Because my experience has been, not just what I've learned, but my experience has been when one's intuition is really strong, it's because we're really in balance. We're living more in the Tao and in harmony with ourselves and those around us if our intuition is awake and really alive. And so that's why you can see the qualities of the heart in the third eye. But yes, reason, the way that we use our minds, that's all there too. And our ego is not transcended at that point. We still have an egoic identity at that level, in my opinion, right? These are the ways that I understand it. So the reason that is a universal significance that I think combines well with what you were saying about blue is because you're kind of doing this dance of like, how much am I being egotistical and how much am I really living in the Tao, in balance, balance with my own dharma? And what I would offer you is that this dream is essentially a signpost about that. So there's a couple of things. The first is, from the philosophy of dreaming, it's really important to remember for yourself that you can't have a dream message unless it's presently true for you. Dreams are never speculative. These kind of symbolic dreams, they're not that. They only talk about what's occurring for you in your life right now. And so the fact that what it seems like, and I feel pretty confident already, but we're going to really explore this, and I think we're going to reach this conclusion. It seems like your David Bowie is a superconscious aspect, and we'll recap what that means and how to work with superconscious aspects. But you can't see a superconscious aspect with dimensions and meaning that's not true for you now. And so what I'm taking from the colors at the moment is that you're really on your path and you're headed in the right direction in terms of striking that balance. You are walking and actively taking steps towards being more Bowie-like, maybe we would say, and kind of realizing something that's been probably a lifelong aspiration for you ever since you were a young man.
Right? I'd say so. Yeah, I'd say it's very true. As I shared before this session, when I saw him in the late 1970s wearing a wooden dress, singing about having been a heroin addict, it took me years to know that that's what that song was about. But I was just like, blew my mind. He was setting a bar for me on what you could do in being creative, just fully be entrusting yourself. And I think he was entrusting others around him, but yeah, it was cool. Because I was like probably 11 at the time. So good formative time to have someone blow my mind.
And that's been a theme in your work and in your life, right? You use a lot of creativity with what you do.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of creativity with them. Yeah, a lot of analytical. So I like that blend very much with that. But where I have the most fun is definitely the creativity these days it's been in presenting to people. So that's my version of being on stage, is getting to do that and present to people, get people's eyes to open up, and then thus their mind is opening up with that. That's been very cool. But yeah, I have to do it in blue and white face paint with Wolverine here the next time. You're like, well, we're not sitting through this.
All right. So talk to us about Wolverine. This seems like a good time.
Yeah. Friends of mine and I, we used to read the comic books of the X-Men in grade school. Now the movies that have been on with the characters, very interesting. What is it? It's controlled chaos? I don't know. It's something, it seems like controlled chaos, that hairstyle. If you're like big, bushy here, like flat and kind of spiky and mean there, it's like interesting hair. Certainly saying something. I mean, in his case, he is controlled chaos, is his character. And if he's out of control, it gets ugly for anyone around him.
You're on the right track here. Yeah. So the universal meaning of hair is our thinking.
Okay.
So what I'm imagining is probably a part of your life is you feel or know from experience that deep within you, you have a lot of creative power, but that can also be aggressive power.
I think so. I think you're right. One of the last presentations, I felt like I was definitely more aggressive, animated, more theatrical than I'd been in a presentation. And it was just like, interesting. I was happy for it. I wasn't like trying to stop it, but I wasn't getting out of control where people were going to have to leave. So it was an interesting dynamic for me, but I felt more like some of the people that were older, I could tell, oh, okay, I'm blowing them back a little bit with the energy because I don't think they're ready to absorb it fully. So it's like, okay. But
also wondering, was this dream, after your talk, or was it?
It was a while after, because that was back in October. So I mean, I get to give smaller presentations on Zoom and things like that, but this is like the ones I enjoy. It's like, oh, good, we've got 40, 50, or I prefer more people, and just different energies from them and different ways of them being engaged or not, and looking at them in the eye, because Zoom you can do in such a small way. It's like, okay, I can scroll through and see if somebody's asleep and try and rouse them. But in person is so much better. And you get this, Thomas, from teaching. It's like, oh, which kid is like totally zoned out, and how do I get him or her back? And there's enjoyment in that for me if I succeed in that. So it's in September. So this dream was in early January. So
you don't have any clear memories of circumstances within a couple of days before the stream by any chance, do you?
Not particularly.
Not necessary. It's just helpful. And that's a good guideline for you to remember in the future too. If you want to jot down a little bit about the circumstances or anything that stood out from the day before or a couple of days before, typically events that we've just experienced in waking life will also trigger dreams. One of the common misconceptions about symbolic dreaming that people that really don't believe in the spiritual dimensions of dreaming get stuck on is the idea that, well, I'm just metabolizing my waking life. That's not inaccurate. It's just very incomplete. That's one level of meaning that you'll see in your symbolic dreaming. But the fact that recent events will trigger a particular set of dream symbols doesn't mean that it diminishes their meaning. It's just trying to help us realize this material is awake in our life right now, and we have the ability to grow with certain spiritual issues better given those circumstances. We can't create every kind of experience we might like to have out of thin air. We have to work with the environment and the resources that are available at the time. But yeah, especially with a bigger dream like this, a dream that has a larger significance or ties to something that's more of a lifelong issue, the day-to-day circumstances aren't necessarily as important. I think that you bringing in that little thread is absolutely tied to this dream, even though it wasn't within a few days. And I think what I'm getting at is, well, one of the things that's an issue and why it was David Bowie in this dream is because as you learn to flow and you've done your Buddhist practice and things of that nature, you've realized that as people, we can get out of control, right? We can start losing it all. We can start staking things on bids that are really unlikely to pan out for us, and they don't. We can get chaotic.
Right.
But nature as a force is potentially very chaotic because it's so extraordinarily powerful. Right. But it's not our nature to just leave things in raw chaos. We channel energy. We use what might be a natural flow that's very forceful to accomplish things that have real value. And we think about these things and what it is that we want for our life and the legacy that we want to leave. And that's something that seems like fits your personality pretty well, is being concerned with how do I channel the energy that I have and what I've been given so that it's going to lead to something that's valuable for people.
Spot on, Thomas. Have you known me for like decades? How old are you, dude? How old is your soul? Like, anyway, so yes, yeah, I'd say that's spot on. That has been a big part of what I would define as my dharma for going back at least into college. So, yep, at least for several decades. And that's the case. It's very challenging and can be very frustrating to me if I feel like I am somehow stymieing myself or something else is stymieing me from what I'm meant to be doing. And Michelin has cheered this over the last 2 years quite a bit. But then the universe is quite amazing. And well, that's not exactly what you're meant to do. You're meant to do something with those talents in a slightly different way. So it's just, it's very interesting. And that's the part always for me is like balancing, like how much of that is the ego getting ahead and saying, this is the path we're supposed to be on. Wait a minute. The other path that the universe is trying to guide you down is also amazing and wonderful. So it's just finding the balance of pushing the accelerator and then taking your foot off the accelerator enough to know where you're going. And type of thing for me has always been enough of a challenge, but I do love, I just got an invitation to go do a public presentation. I'm going to talk with the town manager. It's just so funny. Like I get the invitation for that and it's just like, hooray, hooray, party, woo, woo, woo. I'm like, okay, that's just part of me. That's just, that is definitely part of me. I get that chance. That's joyful. Sure, whatever. What do you want me to talk about? I know it's on buildings, so then it's easy, but definitely a part of me for sure. No.
Well, I think what you were saying about being stymied might be a good into discussing the rash, his arm, right? So it was which arm, the right or the left?
It appeared to be his right arm as we were standing and walking. It's so funny. I can't remember if that was just disconnected from his body when I was seeing it, or if it was part of his connected body at that time. I'll admit I don't remember. Was it just floating there? But definitely felt foggy around his arm. What came to me is I know enough of his history. I could say what my brain said it was. It was just that symbol of when he was a heroin addict. And just like, I don't know this. I haven't researched it to figure it out. But the cancer that killed him may well have been because he was experimenting with a lot of stuff when he was in his free flow. And his body was like, wow, dude, you're taking enough time off of our body right now. So to me, it felt like it was some symbol of his addiction, but drug usage is what I was seeing with that. But it didn't feel awful. It just felt like it was a cool thing you were trying, but it definitely changed the course of the length of your life. And it screwed you up pretty bad for a while. It really did. So I'm not an experimenter with drugs. I like marijuana, but I still ain't an experimenter with that these days very much. So I definitely didn't have his tendency to be that. Like, I don't trust humans with pharmaceuticals. That's my problem. Like, yeah, what the hell have you put in there to make an extra buck? Yeah. So that's some deep issue I've got.
Well, we can talk about the universal significance of those symbols. So our arms are tied to our purpose, our arms and our hands, because this is what we use to create besides our minds. But on a physical level, we use our arms and our hands to create in life. And a rash is an irritation, right? It's something that's irritating us or annoying us or bothering us. So that would be the universal significance of, how do you think that would tie into what Paul was talking about?
I'm pretty sure that there is a tie-in, and the personal significance that we have to bring in here is exactly what you were starting to talk about. And so the shadow material that's underneath this very particular attitude that you have about David Bowie and his addiction, which again, you're doing this interpretation wonderfully because you're understanding it's not about David Bowie. You can have all the misconceptions and biases that you want. Those are actually useful tools. This is about your understanding of a man that is coming to stand in for a part of you in the way that you relate to your own life. And so his addiction and the way that you perceive it is what's important here. But what I'm feeling or what I'm intuiting is under the issue of addiction itself, you have had some reflective times about why a human being would have an addictive tendency in the first place. Why do you think people get addicted to things, Paul?
I boil that down to do with people being a mix of sad and feeling that they can't control the chaos of life within themselves or around them. And so then it's like, I'm going to have something that makes me feel very different. And that feeling of being different and no longer either so overwhelmingly without joy, because sadness is not bad on its own. It's just like, if that's all you're feeling, you have that all the time. Because I don't know of anyone who's had happiness all the time. That's got to be a different plane or planet or something like that where that happens, and that's a problem. But we don't seem to have that here, where it's like too much happiness, too much, can't take it. Doesn't seem to happen. But overwhelming sadness without happiness at all, and then that sense of chaos in the world. There's even times I've looked at the world and I'm like, wow, how incredibly weird that this world is. And then it's amazing that it works out that people aren't just killing each other all the time. And so I embrace how that love energy is there and what keeps people forgiving and accepting and going with things. But to me, and not having had an addiction, quote unquote, though I smoked cigarettes, but I could stop as soon as it bothered me that my hair stunk too much. And marijuana, I was using a hell of a lot in my late teen years. But then when it started to be like, oh, it's making me feel too paranoid, I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I just kind of past it. But what I've interpreted for people that have that is just that the world feels too chaotic. They're looking at it through the lens. They can't see the calm. And they're just like, this makes me feel different. And I'm going to drink it, smoke it, inject it to feel different. And the sense I had reading about David Bowie, at least as he wrote about, was for a period of time, he was using it to be highly creative. And then it just got where he lost control of that. Where it's like, oh, I'm not doing it to be creative anymore. I'm just doing it because I don't like the way I feel. And I'm going to feel different. So that's how I boil it down. I'm sure there's different theories on addiction. That's how it resonates for me.
This is all about you. And that is pertaining to this pretty clearly. I think we're starting to knit it together. I think really honing in on the idea of a feeling of lacking control and it making someone sad, right? When people feel like they don't have control in their lives. Because what you have learned, which I think is very wise, is how to harmonize your life path with the flow of the world around you. Knowing you can't just go upstream, that's impossible.
Right.
But not only can you go with the flow, but you can even shape and control that flow because you have a lot of power that you've been given within yourself. You have a capacity to affect a lot of change. And you know that that involves a rich kind of relationship with the energy of the world around you and those people that are around you. And how do you achieve all of that? But I think one of my favorite spiritual adages, which is kind of funny because it's just from a guy that we used to know, but he was a big meditator. This is an old roommate of ours. And he once said, in order to know how to lay down the sword in your life, you first have to grasp it. You have to pick it up first. And so I'm really wondering about the period of time when you were having struggles in your first marriage. Did it get pretty dark and chaotic?
Yeah, it certainly did get dark and chaotic. There was not enough yelling at each other, honestly, but there was some of that, but there should have been more of it probably to have things really come out. But yeah, there certainly was the darkness, quote unquote, of obsessively working at my business because I didn't know what else to do to be able to keep money coming in. During that time didn't help anything. It didn't help in the relationship, but I don't regret not being in that relationship is the thing. I do feel it was in the darkness of that and the chaos, what was being pulled apart for me, I was definitely codependent and I was trying to be a healer and make her better and things like that is what felt like was my meaning in the relationship. That got pulled apart and then I had to face being alone, which I didn't realize was such a problem for me, but it really was a problem to be like, can I be comfortable being just alone? And it took years of getting like from being semi-comfortable to comfortable to like, oh, I like this. Oh, this is good to be alone. I needed to be comfortable being on my own. And that was something that took years to get to that place because it was like, where's my meaning or where is my security blanket or where's my whatever I was looking for within that. So yeah, there was definitely darkness within that. Going back to the business, it was very interesting. It's a part of my personality that's sometimes good, but maybe not always very good. I will just keep working. If I have to get work done to make income and to make the customer get what they paid for, because I feel like that's very important, I'll freaking work all the time.
We don't judge people, in their life path or where we've all been or where we're going. But I want to ask you to put an addictive overlay onto that work behavior and talk to me about that a little bit.
Great question. I've admitted it in small ways, but yes, there was an obsessiveness and it has to be an addictive towards that work at that time. It felt like it was my meaning in life to be delivering that work. And then when I've given my word or the word that my employee had given that something would be done in a certain way, in a certain time, that became the priority. Even if it's like, oh, I'm having relationship problems. No, I got to do this work. I'm committed to this client to get this done.
Do you believe that people come into our lives to teach us something?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there was mutual teaching in the relationship I had with my ex-wife. But yeah, I had to learn that there were tendencies in my ex-wife that were similar enough to my mom's personality that there was something there that I was not going to be able to rescue people. I'm able to help them be on their journey, but I was not going to be able to truly rescue people. So that was a lesson learned. And it's still taken a long time. I can finally say that and really believe it. Now it's like, no, you really can't do it, dude. So yes, for sure. There's lessons to be learned. What I'm believing, what I'm attracting now are more to do with people that I'm enjoying continuing to grow together with. Unless it doesn't feel anymore like there has to be like some big 2x4 upside the head type of lesson. It's more like cool people. These are good people to be with and spend time with and have experiences and growth with.
So I bet you didn't think that we would get so much from the rash, huh?
No, right?
This rash tells us, Paul, is that addictive pattern you had with working during your first marriage, that you've worked through it, essentially. It's trying to tell you that was something that you needed to go through and grow through, but you have. It's also giving you some specific messages about the growth that caused in you. And it's telling you, you still know it's there, right? It's a scar. Right. It's part of your story because you gained that hard-won wisdom from that period in your life.
I think it's very true. I'd still say I have to be careful to not fall into it even as an employee now, or even what I do with Heart of a Building, because I can have that propensity still. So, yeah.
Well, the reason I'm saying that's really brilliant is that actually is a superior meaning to what I had just voiced. It's not a scar, it's a rash. So what it's saying is this is resolved, but you could potentially fall back into that.
Thank you. Very, very much appreciate it. I can see how this can be extremely beneficial to the people you work with.
Thank you all very much for joining us on DreamSpeak, and we look forward to learning with you more in another episode.
You can find this podcast on all popular streaming services. Email us a dream today at contact@dreamspeak.us. Check out our YouTube channel for a free introductory dream course. Connect with DreamSpeak for even more learning. Our socials are in the description. Our theme music was composed by me, Rika. This podcast does not constitute medical advice. If you have concerns about your well-being, talk to your doctor or a mental health professional.